Now to Syria, where evacuations resumed today from eastern Aleppo. Attempts to evacuate civilians and rebel fighters were halted on Friday amid accusations that both sides violated the terms of the evacuation agreement, which led to violence. Syrian state media reports that 75 buses entered the city this morning. As part of the new deal, a convoy of buses was also sent to evacuate civilians from two rebel-held villages in northern Syria. However, activists in the region say some of those buses have been burned by militants affiliated with al-Qaeda, which could affect the success of the evacuations. Joining me now from London to discuss these recent developments is CBS News foreign correspondent Jonathan Vigliotti. So, Jonathan, what can you tell us about the evacuation efforts?
Yeah, Elaine, it's been a slow start to the new ceasefire deal, to say the least. It was announced yesterday, and only today, 24 hours later, did evacuations start to take place, according to Syrian state TV. Video this morning that we've been looking at showing buses and, as you mentioned, ambulances re-entering eastern Aleppo to resume those evacuating efforts of civilians and rebel fighters. The rebel-held area that we're talking about has been the target of an intense bombing campaign by pro-government forces. As you mentioned, convoys were also preparing to evacuate residents from two villages besieged by rebels. That's the location where several of those buses, were being told, were set on fire. The incident shedding light on just how fragile this deal is, we're told. Fortunately, nobody was injured. A similar deal fell to violence on Friday afternoon. That's when shelling halted the evacuation process. Dozens of ambulances and buses packed with people were caught in the crossfire. Today's evacuations, if you will, are kind of a do-over. At this point, though, it's still unclear how many people have actually been evacuated today. We do know as many as 9,000 civilians and rebel fighters reached safety before that first ceasefire abruptly ended on Friday.
Well, Jonathan, this morning the UN Security Council met behind closed doors to discuss a resolution aimed at ensuring that UN officials can monitor the Aleppo evacuations. Russia has since announced it plans to veto that resolution. Why would the Russians veto those efforts?
Yeah, you know, they are very much pro-Assad at this point, and they're not getting into too much detail, actually, on why they would go into this and actually veto access to eastern Aleppo. What we do know, though, is in the past 6 years of this ongoing civil war, UN observers have petitioned quite regularly to gain access so that they can witness and observe firsthand what civilians are going through on a regular basis, also to petition for more aid. And over the course of 6 years later, of course today, as you mentioning, Russia again vetoing any effort to gain access inside eastern Aleppo and those areas very much hardest hit during this ongoing war.
Well, Jonathan, after 6 years of fighting, as you noted, Bashar al-Assad's government now controls the country's 5 largest cities and its Mediterranean coast. Can you just describe for us once more what life has been like for these civilians who have been caught amidst the fighting?
I mean, you can only imagine the video that we see coming out of eastern Aleppo, especially now, especially these past few days. You have to consider just how cold it is there right now. Temperatures plunging below freezing, and where they're living in areas that are really skeletal remains of a city that once existed that no longer does. So you can imagine not a lot of food, very cold, a lot of people very much injured. The ceasefire deal certainly a turning point in the war because it allows some of these civilians a way out. But even if the war were to end tomorrow, Elaine, it's going to take generations to fix Syria. 500,000 people have been killed. Many more risked their lives to travel to Europe, and countless others, as we've been talking about, still trapped in Aleppo. Hopefully this ceasefire, its ongoing success, will allow for their evacuation.
All right. Jonathan Vigliotti in London for us. Jonathan, thank you.